Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. Tonight I am joined by Gothi Trent East, and we're going to, all right, take it back for a sec. We've gotten a lot of requests recently for some episodes on like real life application of things. A lot of people want to know how to apply our faith in their everyday life. And I think some of that extends to ritual and to, altar work and ancestor veneration and things like that. And those are really good topics. But what I think is really important and is often confused by folk, and I think more so in the day and age that we live in, is taking our values and not just giving them lip service, but finding ways to apply them in real world situations when it's not in the realm of theory and it's in the realm of, what do you do? And I think that's valuable for everybody. I think that's probably a really valuable thing for anyone in any faith, is to examine their values and what that looks like in their lives and not just in their places of worship. But before we get cracking on it today, I'm trying to think any updates I've got for you. Charming of the Plow at Njordshof is coming up in February. It's going to be spectacular. Looking forward to seeing you all there. That's February 21st through the 23rd. Njordshof is our newest Hof. It is in White Springs, Florida. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful setting. It's a nice spot with amazing people. It's got a lot of really good energy there. It's going to be big. We've got people coming around from far and wide in the Njordshof district, but also we've got folks showing up from outside the district. My family will be there. I will be there. I'm very excited to see all of you there if you can make it. If you're interested, please contact anyone in the AFA you want to, but your local folk builder will get you there. Gothi East here will get you there. I'll get you set up if you let us know, and we can make that happen. Absolutely want to see all our members there, but if you haven't joined yet, this is a really good opportunity to check it out and see what we're all about at one of our premier events. So if that's something you'd like to do, please let us know, and we can see about making that happen. It really is getting to that point. Time is going by quick, but I also should talk about Ostara coming up at Thorshof. Nick, quick draw with the dates on that. I appreciate that. That's going to be March 21st through the 23rd. That's at Thorshof in Linden, North Carolina. Yeah, it's New Year snuck up on me, but we got a lot of really cool things that we're doing. For anybody that doesn't know or missed the memo, we are celebrating all year long the 30th anniversary of the Asatru Folk Assembly. The AFA was solidified over the Yule at the tail end of 1994, and we came out swinging in 95 at the start of the year, being the dawn of the Asatru Folk Assembly. So, got 30 years in. They have been tremendous. I am in the capacity that I can say we a lot. Unfortunately, I was not there when I was 14 years old, and this was all starting out. I didn't know it was a thing. I did not find the AFA until we were a few years into it there. Didn't know about the AFA till it was, I think, 6 years old when I first heard of it. But we've got an amazing history. We're trying to celebrate that all year long, and we are building on a tremendous foundation going into the next 30 years here. And there's a lot of really cool stuff for us to do. If and it's stuff that we should be doing together. So I think this is as good a time as any. While I'm doing plugs, if you're listening to this broadcast and you agree with us and you are a heterosexual white person that would like to come home to your ancestral gods, now is the time. It is an auspicious time. It's a cool time to get involved in the AFA because we are at a point in Asatru's recent development to where a motivated individual or a group of individuals can accomplish quite a bit and really make a difference. We're in a time where we are laying foundations for generations to come, and we want all of you guys helping. We can accomplish a lot more when we are working together, but got a lot going on. We'd love for you to be part of it. So check it out. Come to one of the events this year. Go to our website, sign up, join at runestone.org. If you ever have any questions, talk to one of our folk builders. If you have any questions, you should also talk to us here on Victory Never Sleeps. VNS@runestone.org. You can email a question at any time. If something comes to you, other than when this is going live, we'd be happy to answer it on the next broadcast. So please get your question in. Some people say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but they're wrong. There's lots of stupid questions, but that's okay. We'll answer most all of them. But we're eager to hear from you guys, and that all certainly goes for tonight's broadcast. We are being simultaneously, this video is being broadcast live on Odyssey, on Twitch, on Twitter, at Rumble, here on YouTube, at VK, and it's also going to be released. We're getting pretty quick. Usually now it's starting to get released on Thursdays on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Amazon. So most spots where you're getting your podcasts, you can find us there. Like, share, subscribe, and if you do those things, if you're catching this live, we are monitoring them for live questions. So please ask anything that you want. And like I said, if you got something and you're catching this later, we will get to it the following week. That said, at the dawning of this year, how are the Easts doing?
We're doing great. Our son is due in April 18th. Good birthday to have. We'll see if that actually ends up being the date, but gym's going well. I think I messed up my knee doing squats about an hour ago. We'll see how that turns out. Otherwise, though, things are great. How about the Flavels?
The gym gets rough. I wish I had a cooler story. Anybody who is listening to this podcast, I have a black eye. I've got some battle damage under my right eye. Got to always pay attention when you're in the gym, even if you've been doing it for a few decades. I was doing almost full stack on each side of. We've got like a dual arm standalone cable crossover machine. Trouble is, the weight I was pushing is heavier than I am, so I have to brace myself against something to be able to push it down. So that means I put my foot back up against the machine, conspicuously close to some pedals that you press to release the arm so you can move it. Apparently, I hit one of those pedals and punched myself in the face with either the handle or my hand or whatever, but I rocked myself pretty good. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was nauseous and like spaced out for the rest of the afternoon. So I think I concussed myself. But that's been lifting good for about 23 years now. I've got I think this is my third injury that I've had. So I'm pretty fortunate, and it's not that bad. I just look a little bit funky.
That's not a bad track record.
No, not at all. Not at all. And early on when I first started, I was not necessarily using a lot of wisdom. So I think I made it out all right. GW Farnsworth with $5 or five coffees, $25 donation. Thank you so much. You are very regular with your generosity, and it is much appreciated. So we've got a couple of questions coming in, and I wanted to first lay a little bit of the groundwork. Actually, Trent, will you set us up?
Sure. So the backstory, I guess. The Alshara Gothi texted me at 4 p.m. maybe and said, "You want to do BNS tonight?" And I said, "Sure. What's the subject?" And he took a long time getting back to me, and said commitment, truth, and loyalty, or something along those lines. So, setting us up, it's in all seriousness, it's about living Asatru. Basically, it's as the episode is titled, I believe, "Living True," living with Troth, living with loyalty to your folk, to the Aesir, and to yourself, really. Following the 10 noble virtues and being a shining beacon of our faith and of our people. And as in a way, when you wear the hammer, you are representing our gods to an extent. And so it's living in accordance with that, living how you should when you practice this faith.
So there's a lot of places we can go with that, and I'm sure we will. But what I really want to hammer down on this one is living true with, what did I say? I had something in the title of this, anybody looking at it, but basically talking about loyalty and commitment and the various things that I think troth, loyalty, commitment is what I had. And that value of either of those things writ large, that bigger loyalty, fidelity is one of our noble virtues. I think the different words that are synonyms for that quality apply to, we tend to compartmentalize this to different pieces of our lives. But the principle and the value extends beyond all of that, and it's a way of being, it's a way of defining oneself. So the word Asatru, it breaks down and it means, true to the Aesir. And you'll get a lot of people that say it means belief in the Aesir. And it does. And it's come to mean in modern Icelandic like religious, like specifically a religious belief or a religious conviction. But it goes back to the same root concept of, your belief in something is your having faith in it. Having faith in it means you have trust in it. Your belief in its truth isn't about verification or not. It's about trustworthiness. It's about reliance. It's about fidelity. And it goes back to our concepts of your word being your bond and making a pledge. So it means, your pledged loyalty or your devotion to something. It is in a lot of root words and root concepts when we talk about marriages. Also, when we talk about, different military or national oathing, any of that oathing process goes back to these concepts. And a couple of things that I wanted to set up, and we'll answer any and all questions tonight, and we'll take it into, more specific things. And that's really going to be some meat and potatoes of the show. If you guys have some good questions, we can apply it in a lot of different situations. Getting out what it is, I think we all know, but this is kind of the point of the program. And I've ran into this recently with people that, you learn that it's always good to refresh these concepts, because I think that all too often we see Asatru in the light of history or, and I don't say this disparagingly, but in like this fantasy world where it's dragons and chainmail and swords and stuff. And I don't think we often enough think about it in your day-to-day existence, in interacting with your family, and interacting with your employers, in interacting with people that you're involved with in a number of different dealings in your life. Your loyalty to the gods, your loyalty to those around you, your adherence to your word and the oaths that you make, those are things that a lot of people have trouble applying in their real life. And I think that our brain is a very elastic thing, and it is never more so than when we find ourselves wanting to justify bad behavior. We are capable of seemingly infinite mental gymnastics to come up with a reason that no, but in this case, this is the exception. Or no, I get you, but this is different. This is different. And I think we can say that about literally any situation that comes up to try to make ourselves feel better. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, because it's so fundamental to our worldview, to our value system, but also just to what is Asatru. It's being loyal and having troth with the Aesir. So that as kind of a setup, and we'll take it to a number of different scenarios here, but I want to see what we've got going on, or what people are asking, or if anything is moving us a direction. And we will get to some of the questions that are a little bit less directly related. We're happy to answer any of you guys' questions tonight. So one thing that is Trent, how would you express what it means to demonstrate your troth to the Aesir?
Attending AFA events is one. And if you can't, for whatever reason, you make sure to honor the Aesir in bloat. You can have a little family sumble if need be. You can simply give them offerings and speak to them. Another one, a big one that I like to stress, is wearing your hammer outside your shirt, unless it's some kind of workplace safety hazard. If people ask you what it is, you tell them. If they ask what you were doing for Christmas, you can do as Witten Spawn suggested and say, oh, well, for Yule, my family did this. It's being open and upfront and proud of your loyalty to the Aesir. And also, I think it is learning to use verbiage that a lot of us are learning not to use verbiage that a lot of us use when we're first starting out. So when I first became Asatru, I described myself as a Norse pagan, and that made me cringe a little just saying it. So, but I did that because that felt accessible. I was kind of describing our faith on other people's terms, and that is a mistake, in my opinion. If you do that, I get why you're doing it, but I would encourage you to call it Asatru, and then you can explain what it is from there. But that is part of it, because Norse pagan it doesn't fully encapsulate what all Asatru is, whereas Asatru does. It is loyalty to the Aesir. So, to summarize, I guess, it's using correct and respectful and pious vocabulary and verbiage. It's wearing your hammer proudly. It's being Asatru openly. If somebody asks why you're taking a weekend off, let's say February 21st to the 23rd, and going to Florida, don't just say, well, I'm going to see family, as true as that may be. Say, I'm going to a church event, or you could say, I'm going to the Asatru Folk Assembly's Charm of the Plow event at Njordshof. You can be as specific as you like, but at least tell them it is a religious function.
So A couple of things. First, you can keep going, and I'm sure you would. But there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I think are really important to hit on, and it's something to realize about this episode and what we're trying to cover today. Loyalty is good. I think if we said that, everybody'd be like, "Yay, loyalty!" And like we all understand that as a vagary. Certainly, it is. We all know that that's something we're supposed to say is good. But putting flesh on that and making that real is something that is hard for folks, and for a variety of reasons. It's hard for some people because they are cowardly by nature, but it's hard for other people because sometimes, like in a number of things Trent just said, sometimes it's just awkward, or you're not used to it, or you're not in the habit of it, or it's easier to just, you don't want to have a 15-minute conversation with this guy that asks you the question. So you just give him something and go about your business. One thing that I want to stress: loyalty is not merely the absence of disloyalty. And I think a lot of people sometimes make that mistake. They see it as a passive trait that's like, well, I got Trent's back if anything bad happens, and that's the extent of loyalty. Loyalty isn't just responding to the call if something emergency happens. It's an active promotion of another person's best interest. It is a bonding of yourself and your things that you value and place value upon, extending to the success of someone or something else. You attach yourself to someone or something in a way to where you rise and fall with that thing, and they rise and fall with you. Part of our troth to the Aesir is us representing them in Midgard and elevating them as much as we can, finding spots to help build their fame and not only restore them to their rightful place in the, minds and hearts of our people, but to exceed that and to raise them yet further. And all of those things sound really lofty, but as simple as, if you're in a place of business and your coworkers wear their crucifix, wear your hammer. Don't just feel okay wearing your hammer. If you look around and you see crosses, make sure they see your hammer. If people are talking about what they are doing during their holidays, and Jamal's talking about Kwanzaa, and Shmuley's talking about Hanukkah, and whatever's over there talking about Christmas and whatever, don't just keep your head down and nod and, sip some eggnog. Talk about Yule. Be proud of what you're doing. I mentioned this, I think, on the last broadcast, but there's people that I can imagine in particular families, that's going to be really offensive, or in certain scenarios, certain places. But for the vast majority of us in the United States, in our day-to-day life with coworkers or people at the gym or at the store or at wherever you're going to find them, it's at your worst normal outcome is they're just going to find it odd. A lot of people will find it interesting and be mildly curious. Other people will just make note of, oh, you don't celebrate Christmas? Oh, no, but you see, well, so you don't do, and you can get in the whole conversation of what that is. It opens doors, it opens a conversation. But at the bare minimum, it lets people know this is a thing. And I think all too often, something else about loyalty is it's advancing the cause in the long term with I want to say with cost to yourself, but not always, but with the potential of cost to yourself. A big part of loyalty is you being awkward and dealing with something awkward so that it's not awkward when your children deal with it. You being uncomfortable in something that's unknown, but you want to stand true and loyal to the gods, then the next guy that comes through your place of business will have it a lot easier when the boss asks them something about Asatru or something about the AFA. You being willing to stand proudly for what you do sets a precedent, and it sets a tone for those that come to follow you, and it blazes a trail for them. And that's part of your loyalty to both to the ICER and to the Asatru Folk Assembly. Your proud membership of the Asatru Folk Assembly is a demonstration of your troth to the ICER. If you're like secret Asatru, but you disavow and you quit the AFA because you get scared because somebody looked at you funny in the work parking lot, that's pretend. That's not loyalty. But people will tell themselves whatever they want to feel better about it or to thump their chest. But that's not what it's about. Another thing I wanted to mention about loyalty before I move on to some different pieces of it is let's go ahead and see where the conversation takes us. There's literally infinite ways that you can apply loyalty. And this isn't about that. It's about ingraining it in your character to where you recognize it when the opportunity presents itself and that you get the gravity and the concept. So what else we got going on here? Oh, we got a couple more donations. Alzie Coleman Miller the fourth bought us 3 coffees. It's $15 donation. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And Jake from Fresno bought us 2 coffees. Hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA. Also, Alzie said, hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of you guys that have been so generous to us. Looking over in the side. So we're going to front load with the number of loyalty things here. I know we have a couple of questions that are sort of unrelated, but we will absolutely go wherever the conversation takes us once, I don't know, once I get done ranting about loyalty. But so I've talked about your AFA membership and your proudly not hiding who you are and displaying the things that you believe in. But I think something that's fundamental to that I wanted to bring up is that in order for you to be loyal to something, you have to actually believe in it. And I think that I've seen a change within my lifetime here in the United States. And we have an international audience and an audience that's certainly nationwide in the United States. And I think it works different regionally. But I've been to, I was talking to some of our Swedish members when I was in Sweden a few years back. And Scandinavia and much of Europe has been largely secular for 4 generations now or so, since, I don't know, like 1920s or so. You have a big movement away from religiosity in Europe. You didn't have that in the United States until relatively recently. I was born in 1981, and when I was coming up, and I was in Alaska, so in the South it was much more than this. But certainly where I was, about half the kids were church-going kids. You had a number of the other half that wasn't, that would still go to church on like holidays and were, in some way religious. But you had about half that were regular practitioners of their faith. And, typically where I was, it was some kind of a Protestant Christianity. But that was, at least once a week, if not more. That was what they did. It was a big part of their life. It was a big part of things. I don't think we have the same demographic that finds the AFA now. We get a lot of people that don't have any connection with practicing religion, so it doesn't come as easily to them. The idea of piety, of belief in divinities. And I don't say this to say that they're doing anything dishonestly. I don't think it's that at all. I just think it takes a while for that to get ingrained in their habits and the way they conceive the world. Have you noticed that, Trent?
Yeah, for sure. So, you mentioned you were born in 1981. I was born in 2009. Just kidding, 1997. And here in Georgia,
Didn't
I'm
know
in
you
the.
were joking.
Yeah, okay.
Look at your
You've
face
almost
value.
dunked me. Whatever. Ruined my whole train of thought. Anyway, I'm in Georgia, which is the Bible Belt. My Granny East, that many of you have heard me hail at Sumble, was an old school Southern Baptist. I remember she wouldn't let me watch Pokemon because she thought it was devil worship somehow. For example, that's how religious this whole area was until maybe 15 years ago, 20 or so. Everybody pretty much here went to church. They didn't all like it. They weren't all super devout, of course, but they all went to church. And even still, there's many people here consider themselves like a proud Christian, and it's not a big part of their personality like Asatru is for myself, for the Gothi, or many of you. But it was still a thing they at least claimed proudly. And now it's shifting. Even here, it's shifting more, away from that. But it's certainly not as bad as it probably is in California or Sweden, as you mentioned. That, and I was talking to a new Swedish member about this kind of the other day. He sort of described it as a worship of materialism, almost like loyalty doesn't need to exist in this materialistic worldview because you have objects, you have things, you have a nice TV or whatever, and the TV will tell you what to think. And so you don't need to have loyalty to anything because it's all right there for you. Like I said, lost my train of thought. I don't remember where exactly I was going with it, but it's this materialism we're moving towards essentially is what's a big part of what's killing the idea of loyalty to something more sacred rather than profane. We're kind of attaching ourselves more to the mundane rather than the cosmic.
Something that I've noticed about people of faith, and I think that people on our side tend to, I don't know, we get nasty with the Christians over certain things, and sometimes I don't think those are often, necessarily fair. A lot of people think that Christians behave piously because of fear of punishment, fear of hell, fear of damnation. I think that there was a time that was true. I don't, and I'm sure this depends on the individual and on their church and their particular doctrine as it revolves around those things. But what I have seen much more often is genuine people that believe that their God is aware of their behavior, of their actions, of what they're doing. And they're embarrassed if they do something that their God would disapprove of and look down on. They feel guilty. They feel bad. They feel, they don't want to let their God down because they are genuinely pious. And I think that piety is misplaced, but I certainly have a respect for the thought process and for the genuineness of that expression, of that existence. I feel that Asatru would be much better served if we internalized a similar wanting to make our gods proud of us and considering what they think of decisions we make and actions we take. And I know all of that should go without saying, but I've asked this to people. They'll give me some excuse about something that sounds kind of weak, and I'm like, hold on. If the All-Father was standing here in front of you and you were looking him in the eye, would you say this to him? Well, no, of course not. So you don't think that, he's on Lidskjalf and like sees this that's going on? You don't think that our gods are aware of this kind of weakness? And then all of a sudden it's not even like an argument. It's like that thought didn't occur. And I think that's the case with a lot of people. I think a lot of us want to believe in the gods. I think a lot of us claim to believe in the gods and do conceptually. But I think far too few of us genuinely think about it in very real terms, and not out of a sense of fear of punishment, but of you want your gods to be proud of you, and you want them to place value in your manhood or not. Loyalty is a virtue that goes back to the very birth of our folk, and in all branches of our faith is one of the most celebrated core aspects of manhood, which virtue is a reference to. It's a core quality of what defines your value as a man. Loyalty has been that for ever. And so that brings me to a couple of different ways to think of loyalty. Loyalty to our gods is certainly extremely important and paramount, and obviously, a heavy focus of a religious show like this. But loyalty to your comrades, loyalty to people you've made an oath to, loyalty to, depends on the context in a modern sense. One thing I think we all kind of see as self-evident, society still has institutions that require oaths. Most of the time, those oaths tend to be lip service unless you want to use it as a chest thumping thing when you're doing something edgy. I've seen a lot of people we've all seen a lot of politicians, no matter where you find yourself politically, that take oaths to do certain things, and those oaths don't mean anything. Those oaths are literally like the stuff they give you on a phone contract that's 14 pages long or whatever that you don't look at. You just click the yes box. I've seen that a lot with military oaths. I've seen that with, any of those governing oaths. You see that with most oaths that people take nowadays. That's why we have such a struggle to re-infuse value into the oathing process. Something I wanted to, and I want to extend this also to one of the most common oaths that I think most people experience in their life, and that's wedding vows, because loyalty has a lot to do with that too, and not just in terms of sexual fidelity. It has a lot more than just that. Certainly that's involved in it, but being a supportive spouse that is advocating for the best interest of your partner is hugely important. It's a fundamental aspect of the loyalty that's sworn between husband and wife, but it's something that is very often disregarded. We just focus solely on, are you flirting with other dudes or are you sleeping with other dudes? But it's not, man, do you have my back? Do you support me on things in public? Do you make sure I look good in public? Am I making sure you look good? If you have something that's important to you, am I making sure I show up and make you look like $1,000,000. Are you doing that for me? Those things are extremely important part of that relationship. And I think that sometimes we don't think about loyalty in broad terms. We start thinking about it in very finite, very specific terms that are more legalistic. One of the things that's really important about oaths in our society isn't just the letter of the oath. It's the point of it. It's the concept. It's the spirit of it. It's not. There are other groups of people that are very, very big on finite minutia and finding loopholes and whatever else. It's not the point of loyalty in an Asatru context. Loyalty in an Asatru context is a full-throated, open-hearted acceptance of something open-handed between parties. I mean, it's different if it's a compelled oath by your enemies and you're trying to find a way to get out of it because they're going to shoot you if you don't take an oath. That's a different scenario. But oaths that you're entering into of your own free will because you want to, we're noble people. Our nobility is what has defined our race. To be worthy of that, you enter into something without deviousness in your soul. You enter into something open-handed. It's something when a variety of different kind of folk in the Mediterranean, I was told this once by some Danish friends of ours. There's a thing, and I forget the word in Danish, but it translated into like blue-eyedness. Like people in the Mediterranean at different tourist locations would laugh at Scandinavian tourists' blue-eyedness, meaning that they were gullible. You could lie to them and they would believe you because it's so unconscionable to them that you would try to cheat them or swindle them or lie to them when you're having an exchange. It's just not in them to be devious. And they mean it as an insult, but I find it as, kind of a beautiful thing about our folk. No, don't be stupid. Keep your head on a swivel and look out, especially when you're, on the road traveling away from your folk. But that genuineness and adhering to your oath wholeheartedly and because it's something you committed to doing, as opposed to just trying to nitpick the exactitude of when you can get out, is a real fundamental difference between being a noble person and being somebody who's grimy and beneath the dignity of our folk. And I wanted to, I'm throwing a lot of things out there. We'll see if there's questions or comments on it. If there are, we'll get to them. If not, we'll go wherever it goes. But I think some of this is worth saying and worth mentioning. And the other thing that I wanted to say to it is that, so we've experienced this with the AFA. To put so much of what I wanted to do tonight was put some flesh on the bones of this. Oh, awesome. Nick found the phrase. Good on you. So the point of the oath, the point of any oath, is a commitment to do something even when you don't want to. You don't need oaths if everything is, rainbows and unicorns all the time. That's not the point. Something that we, have certainly dealt with in our time in the Asatru Folk Assembly is people who, are super into thumping their chest and pretending they're warriors, and they take these oaths. And then the second they don't like something, or the second they're grumpy at somebody else in the AFA, then all of a sudden they want to be released from their oath. Like, no, the whole reason you took an oath is so we could count on you. when times were tough, so we could count on you when there were people that you got mad at, or when you're in your feelings, or when we're in our feelings, or when whatever. The point of the oath is you push through those things because you gave your word and you made a commitment. And that's what, when we find our folk being successful and winning, you also find people that are true to their word and that stand by their oaths. And that's a defining characteristic. When our folk are faltering, when we find failure, when we find disillusion and downturning of our fortunes, you can look around and you can almost always see a direct correlation to people not being true to their word, not honoring their commitments, not living up to their oaths, not living true. So you don't need oaths for the good times. You celebrate oaths in the good times, but the point of the oath is so you stand strong even in strife and in turmoil and when things have a cost. Another thing I want to mention too, I know I said I'd move on to something else and will in a second, but one huge aspect of oath, loyalty, commitment, and troth is that it comes at a cost. It means nothing if it costs you zero. It's so easy to promise. So I'm gonna get on something else to here in a second, but it's so easy to commit to all kind of things when there's no cost, when it's not real, when there's no conflict in front of you. That's not the point. The point of oaths, and they're rich in warrior aristocracy and in life or death situation, is so that you know when there is a cost, this person is willing to pay that cost or risk that cost to fulfill their end of the bargain. That agreement is what makes you willing to do the same. When that breaks down and is one-sided, it's really unfortunate and bad things happen. But it's very easy to take oaths when there's no consequence. And it's very easy, seemingly, for our folk in this day and age to abandon oaths the second there's a consequence in their place of business, in their relationship, in their family, in dealing with other people that displayed microaggressions towards them. Very small things. But that's the whole point, is to stand against consequence, against threat of violence, against threat of any kind, but threat up until, violence and death. Our people took oaths to stand in the shield wall and not break, to stand and defend, their comrades or their king or their chief or whatever against consequence. Those bonds, those thews that were woven together through oathing is what kept the line steady and kept people safe. It's very easy when one person breaks their oath, breaks their loyalty, and runs. All people do the same. I'd like to kind of close this, my rant off with, we all like to get, interested, entertained, or maybe even, edified in a different way about the portion in Tacitus where he talks about bog stomping. And I think that we're familiar because it is interesting in this day and age with some of the mental illness going around to note that Tacitus mentioned the tribes would bog stomp homosexuals. But there was two groups of people that they would stomp into the bog. It's homosexuals, and it was shirkers or cowards who ran in the face of the enemy. The reason they did it wasn't a cruelty. There was other ways to execute people. The idea was they wanted to stomp them into the bog so that they disappeared from the sight of the folk. because the concept was so disgusting that our people didn't want to be reminded that existed amongst us because it was so ignoble. People who would, make bold oaths over the mead horn and then go out to battle and turn and run when their folk needed them. That concept was so gross to our ancestors that they wanted it eliminated from their sight so that them and their children didn't need to be reminded that such a thing existed. And I think that's really important to kind of internalize on this. I want to go over to the side and see what folks are saying, thinking, or doing, if we have any oath stuff or if they just want us to talk about other things.
So while you look at the questions, I wanted to mention that that blue-eyedness thing. Tacitus mentions that in Germania. Actually, he doesn't call it that, of course, but there's a section where he goes into how the Germans or Germanic peoples they didn't even realize that usury was a thing. They always gave their kin the benefit of the doubt, and it's just really cool that nobility and that good naturedness. And Tacitus was also sort of painting us with this kind of noble savage look, like, oh, they're so silly for not being suspicious of each other thing. But even back then, we were known for being so good natured and joyous in a way, and trusting, maybe to a fault, but it made for a high trust society and a lot of frith.
We conceive of the world through empathy at the most fundamental level. We look to other living things and we project a bit of how we see the world onto them, because it's the only way we really know how to feel that out without further getting to know them or their communication. So our first instinct is to assume that this other person we're dealing with must be like us in some way. Man, if someone did this to me, it'd make me really sad, so I'm not going to do that to them. And it sounds childish, but it is. It's childish in its simplicity. It's how, as children, we learn. It's been really cool. Those of you who are parents know this. Those of you who aren't think that you know this, but you will know it in a whole different way when you are. It's cool to watch Aubrey grow up and learn these things. Just learn how she interacts with like our cats, and then how she interacts with other kids, or how she interacts with me or her mom. Watching her learn social interactions and what to pick up on and how to notice these things, it's instructive, because I think on our basic level, that's how we start. Now, by the time we're my age, by the time we're any of our age that are probably up at this hour watching this, we've got plenty of preconceptions, some good, some bad. We've got a lot of learned experience that we factor in. We notice commonalities between certain kinds of people and certain kinds of situations, and we learn to look out for certain things. But the fundamental, it's nice to, the idea of striving for, at least amongst our folk in our Innengard, that it doesn't occur to us that people would be dealing dishonestly with us, or would be cheating us or acting against us, because why would they? This is my brother, this is my sister, this is someone within our family writ large, within our folk, within our inner yard. That's a beautiful thing, and it's something we should really strive for. And I'm not advising anybody to be blind to treachery, but it's a really nice goal to get back to a place where treachery is so uncommon amongst our people that it is genuinely surprising. So a couple of things, and one question. Obviously, standing up for something and supporting it, donating, being a member is a form of loyalty and commitment. But how is that elevated and advanced? Through activity and involvement. If putting your name to something and your dollar is important, where does your time, presence, and work fit in? Asatru, Trent.
Well, that's kind of something I wanted to touch on if I was just sort of given the floor in general to rant. Is yeah, there is a difference between simply being a supporter of something or saying, yeah, I've got your back, and then actually having that person's back and actually doing those things. Uh, and to kind of tie it into oaths, and maybe this is relevant or maybe I'm just talking, either way, it's a good program, right? Our folk builders in Gothar, maybe the Witten, I'm not sure. At least the folk builders in Gothar take oaths for those stations, and it's, in my opinion, it's not sticking to the oath if all you do is not mess up. To be sticking to that oath, you have to do the things you're going to say you're going to do. The folk builders are tasked with, for example, being a beacon to guide the folk home. You have to actively be folk building and doing things that assist with folk building to be following that oath. The Gothar, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the phrase I was going to use for the Gothar oath as well as I did the folk builder oath, but it's similar. We guide the folk. We have to actively be engaged in doing Gothar things and helping run the AFA and helping the folk builders run the AFA and assisting the Altera Gothi and the Witten, taking directives, etc. If we're just, wearing the cool Rhytho ring and putting on a stole occasionally, that alone is not sticking to the oath. And that should be kind of an answer to the question, I guess, is just saying you support something and, not disavowing that thing or doing anything offensive to that thing it's not the same as having skin in the game. When you actually put effort and time, blood, sweat, and tears into something, you're giving of yourself to that thing. That's a lot more. It's a lot heavier. It means more. Not that we don't appreciate the people who support us, with donations and getting in Twitter arguments on our behalf or whatever, but the people who are here that are doing things, that show up to the Hoff, that help with work days at the Hoff, that all of our awesome folk builders in Gothar, they're going to be appreciated a little bit more because they're here. They're right here now doing things for us and for the ICR, most importantly. So that's the difference.
So I want to touch on two things that you said in there that I think are worth, really worth noting. Is it's about doing active stuff. Well, I guess two things came to mind in what you're saying. It's not just not betraying the gods or not betraying the AFA or not betraying whoever you're oath to. It's also, actively living up to the oath, actively doing your part. There's stuff that Trent said about contributing to the AFA as far as being an active participant, being involved, coming out to things, helping out, lending a hand. All of those things are a big part of displaying your loyalty to the ICR and to the AFA, and we are greatly appreciative of it. Everyone who's donated tonight, that is an expression of Troth to the AFA and the ICR, and it's very much appreciated. What I think, and again, I think that when people say this, it is meant in the very best way from the very best place. And I appreciate it. A thought just came to me, and I appreciate it. But this is part of working with our mindset and being, I got a sneeze that's trying to come that just won't. Anyways, part of changing our mindset is the idea of supporting, being supportive, supporting the AFA with whatever. there's a lot of people that, well, I'm really far away and I can't go to anything. And so I don't want to be a member and I'm not going to contribute and I'm not going to participate, but I support you guys all the way. No, you literally don't. You literally don't support us at all. You wish us well, and that's really nice. But words have meaning, and I think it's important to think about what that means and be intentional in what we say. And this factors in with the oaths that we take and the things that we do commit to. Do we mean that, or is it just something nice to say? If you really mean it, then you need to act like it. And if you don't mean it, then don't say it. Find something else. But I think this is part of taking ourselves seriously that is often been degraded, just like the oaths I mentioned that people treat like they're the user agreements on stuff that are 65 pages long and you don't read them. We've gotten that way with oaths too, and I want to move away from that. The other thing is part of your troth to the Iseer is actively raising your children to be Asatru. This has gotten so much better than it was at one point in time. But there was a period of time where I think there was a lot of families that were mixed religion. The husband at the time, more often than not, it was the husband who was Asatru and the wife was something else, be that some kind of Christian, some kind of Wiccan, some kind of, maybe an atheist. But one of the biggest jobs we have as parents is raising our children, teaching them the things that we believe to be true and right. And, it's become, it's become politically incorrect or inappropriate for us to try to instill our values into our children. But that's one of our most fundamental jobs as parents, is to, you should. It's funny because we've developed a whole lexicon of making words mean different things. We've got words that we've discovered or we've turned into bad words and words that we haven't. And, indoctrinate is bad now, but it didn't used to be. You should be trying to, quote unquote, force your values on your children. That's your job as a parent. Own that. They shouldn't be your values if you don't wholeheartedly believe them to be right. And if you wholeheartedly believe them to be right, you should want your children to learn them and make those a fundamental part of who they are. That's our job. But that's part of that loyalty. And it's also one of those things that, again, in the mixed marriage situation that I mentioned before, that generation, so we would have a generation of people in Asatru that would, well, glad no religion was forced on me when I was a kid. I'll, let my kids decide when they're old enough. Well, I hope your children make the right choice when they're old enough. But by doing that, you've abdicated your fundamental responsibility as a parent. And I think that's damaging to our kids. And I'm glad that that's not the way that we see it nearly as much anymore in the AFA of the people I've spoken to. So another thing was not wanting to do the right thing because you don't want to get in an argument with your spouse. I think we all, and ladies, I'm sure you probably have some version of this or some way this intersects you, but gentlemen, we all know that sometimes, man, it's just easier to just not. And if they're going to, nag at us or we're going to have to deal with some argument we don't want to deal with, let's just whatever, do whatever you want. I think everybody feels that impulse from time to time. But no, if it's important enough, if it's something you believe in, if it's part of your core values and it involves your loyalty to our gods or to anything for that matter, loyalty is something worth having a rough evening over. It's worth, going through the struggle to make sure you and your family live true to our gods. But I wanted to make sure to mention that, and I think it's going to feed into our next question here. You touched on this a bit last week or the week before about the age-old talk about family first. And I'm using the air quotes, but the camera's not wide enough to pick them up. And someone running away from something when the going gets tough. But I was wondering if you could expand on that some more. I had some thoughts, and I figured you could bounce off that. In my mind, uh, it would be that Asatru family and folk are not distinct things. I'll add self to that. I would say there's no real strata there when someone says something silly like family first. So a lot of people, you know what? I will expand on all of those things. Trent, I don't know if you heard previous episodes or whatever, but just based on that commentary or question, what are your thoughts?
I don't recall that part of a previous episode, but I certainly listened to it. As far as saying family first, uh, that comes with caveats. I mean, not to sound cheesy, but I wholeheartedly mean this.
There was actually more to that question and comment, by the way. Keep reading.
Okay, there's a second part. Or anything of that thought, stuff we hear all the time that's backwards or rather in an imbalance. Yeah, there's lots of the thoughts. So yeah, there's like 4 lines of this. Answer that first part first. We'll get to the other chunks here in a second.
All right. So I mean it wholeheartedly when I say the AFA is my family. It has been. Some of you may be aware about 6 years ago, some obese bisexual domestic terrorist in Atlanta said mean words about me. And so a lot of my blood family sided with the mentally ill, obese, blue-haired domestic terrorist rather than me. But the AFA, naturally sided with me rather than against me. And so, yeah, family first usually, but if my sister, were to say you can't be Asatru anymore, it's a bad example for my son, my nephew, I would have to say, well, I'm not going to do that. Sorry. Right. So yeah, the family first thing there's certainly a lot of truth to it, but there has to be exceptions. There has to be limits. That's all I got on that first chunk of that question. I guess if you're going to read the rest of it, I can go into more detail.
I'll read the rest of it in a second. I want to contextualize the family first thing because no part of the AFA doesn't think family is super important. Of course we do. But I reject the false dichotomy of that. We live in an age where our folk is deeply, deeply suffering of soul sickness. So we're thrust in these strange and unnatural choices that people make. But I think people, family extends. You mentioned if, I think you said your sister tried to get you to not be AFA because they didn't want what it would do to your son or her nephew in that example. Your son is just as much your family as your sister is. So I don't think that's a family first struggle there. I think, unfortunately, that's strife amongst kinsmen, which is one of the biggest curses and worst things amongst our folk. Ideally, your family extends to your ancestors and your descendants, and not just those that are, being jerks to you in the here and now, but also if the narrow view of family first is, well, I can't do anything that would hurt my ability to provide or my ability to raise my family or whatever, we would never have men in the world do anything that moves the needle on any of the things that are very important in our history. No men would ever go to war over anything unless somebody's breaking into your house. Because if you overextend that dichotomy, well, I got to stay here and raise my kids, I got to stay here and take care of my wife, that would eliminate most anybody doing anything that involves exploring or doing anything that has an element of risk or an element of adventure to it. But when we look at things that way, we don't look at the benefit to our families. When we do certain things that are for the bigger causes in the world, they benefit our family in less direct ways that are just as important. My argument here is with Asatru, your who you are, your family, your friendships, your life, and your relationship to the Aesir should all be congruent and syncretic and work together and be in harmony. If they're not, something's wrong. If you ever have to choose between the gods and your family, that causes the problem. Like that, you should see where the problem is at that point, because they should all work together. You being a champion for our gods and for our AFA and our folk should benefit your family, and does in countless ways. It benefits and strengthens your family's Hamenya. It wins favor from our gods towards not just you, but those associated with you. One of the biggest things about building reputation, and this is one of the other, like our topic tonight is literally endless because it's the root of so many things. Reputation is largely based on your ability to be loyal or not be loyal. That's a fundamental to most reputation things. There's a skill reputation, but the character reputation, you being a person who's true to their word, you being somebody who's trustworthy, that meant everything. If you win fame for standing up and being loyal to our folk and our gods, the gods will bless you and your family for that. And it's not as easy to see or to add into a checkbook, but it's real and it's fundamental, and it's touched my family in very, very many ways. So that's a thing. That's never a real thing. And if you feel like it is, it's not. You're just not really looking at it through the right lens. And there's things situationally, obviously, like, oh man, I need to go to the Hoff and do something. Uh-oh, my child broke their arm. I need to take them to the hospital. Clearly, one's an emergency and one's not. Like, there's common sense. But to throw that out and to hide behind that as an excuse is ignoble most times. Now, we live in a messed up world, and there may be something to where competing values are pitted against each other, but we should strive to live lives where that imbalance is not possible. So more parts of the question. Or anything on that thought, stuff like we hear all the time that is backwards or rather imbalanced. Asatru, the Aesir, our family and our folk and ourselves, to work naturally, healthfully, nobly, and in line with the Aryan realization, religiosity, and culture. Culture of the Teutons, they all work in tandem. Having yourself and your family's needs, desires, strengths, and struggles aligned with the Aesir, and Asatru means that what is good for the church and the Aesir, what is good for Asatru, is what is good for yourself and your family and the folk. It all correlates and coalesces. Yes, it does. Yes. So, another question. Whitten Young spoke on heroes, and you spoke on oaths. Combine the two. Many of our heroes died for their troth to the Aesir. This is something I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad somebody asked about this. I don't find it likely in modern times, but really, shouldn't we hold ourselves to that same standard? Even if it's not death, jail, doxing, losing family, friends, societal shunning, any of that or none of that. Maybe nothing bad happens, but really, can we call ourselves Asatru if we wouldn't be willing to be that hero and make that leap, be that loyal even through such a sacrifice? Trent.
I would argue, and I am an authority on Asatru to an extent, so I would say no, you can't call yourself Asatru if you're not willing to make that sacrifice. And speaking from experience, I have been doxxed. I have lost family. I have lost excuse my language. My oldest friends just left the AFA because they got like bored of it, I guess. And so, I'm not gonna be like, well, my friends got tired of this, so I'm gonna be tired of it too and go hang out with them and not be Asatru anymore. That would be silly. No, you can't be Asatru and be willing to give it up for mundane hardships. Like the Alsheri Gothi said, standing by your faith in the Aesir doesn't always, build up your savings account, if ever, but it's not about that. It's more than that. It kind of goes back to how I was speaking with that Swedish member about materialism replacing faith. What's more important, Obviously, you need to put food on the table and whatnot, but I don't know. I think part of it, like the last episode of this I was on, we kind of talked about like TV shows and stuff we watched where we looked up to the characters because they were manly and loyal and whatnot. And I don't know. I guess just everything, all the media I've consumed growing up, the heroes were always loyal and steadfast and strong, even to their deaths, because they believed in whatever the show was about, right? So I've always wanted to be that kind of guy, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending on your outlook, we do live in it's called the wolf age, right? We live in this age of cowardice. Largely, people are cowardly. People can be lazy, and it gives us this opportunity to truly be Asatru by simply being Asatru and remaining Asatru, keeping that loyalty to the Aesir in the face of real hardship, of course, or even silly, fake child's play hardship. It gives us the chance to be those heroes that we read about to a lesser extent. Nobody's gonna force a snake down my throat with a hot poker like Roud the Strong, of course, but I get the opportunity every day to wear my hammer and my Gothar ring and my arm ring and all that, and be openly Asatru and remain Asatru. So I think if you don't do those things, you need to reevaluate what you're doing or what you're not doing, and then call yourself Asatru.
I think a couple of decades earlier, Roud the Strong didn't think anybody would do that either. And that is super easy to say. It is very hard to give your life for Asatru. I get that a lot of these things are hard, but a lot of them are very real and they build upon one another. It's not an unreasonable expectation for our gods to want someone who worships them to be willing to be proud of being Asatru in the face of their family wagging fingers at them and, criticizing them for breaking with Christianity. That doesn't seem like too high of a price to pay, but you'd be surprised how many people shrink from that. Your boss asking you uncomfortable questions shouldn't be enough to make you give up a sincerely held belief. If we look at other people of faith in the world, and I mentioned this earlier, I think a lot of people don't come to this from a religious background, so they don't know how to be pious, or they don't know what that looks like because they haven't seen that in their life. It's not something that has ever been real to them in their lived experience, but it's something that they want to be. And that's great. Everybody starts somewhere. One of the things is looking at how other people of faith, how seriously they take it. And you don't need to look to Christianity or to other things that do, and to their credit, have their own martyrs that are willing to, suffer abuse and death and very bad things to still stay loyal to their God. We have many of those heroes ourselves that were persecuted unto death for their faith in Asatru. And they could have given up and pretended they weren't Asatru and, I'm secret Asatru all by myself, but I'm going to do all the Christian things. And many of them did. Tons of people did. And that's why we are where we are today. But I think all of us that are here wish that our ancestors would have stayed loyal to our gods. We celebrate those that did. Conceptually, no, nobody wants to sign up to be the one to take all these hits. But you should be loyal enough to risk that if the other option is denying your gods and turning your back on them. You should be willing to take that risk to say, no, I'm proud of the ICER. I'm proud of the Asatru Folk Assembly. This is who I am, and consequences be damned. And you'd be surprised how many people do and turn out just fine. And by doing so, build a reputation as people of character and build the Haminya and the strength and the reputation of the Asatru Folk Assembly and of Asatru. So yeah, there's a lot of people that don't turn and run that turn out just fine.
And if you do it just right, you get added to the AFA's Wikipedia page. Fun fact.
There you go. There you have it. From the face of hate himself. All right. So what else we got here? We got a number of questions. We're going to pop back to the beginning and kind of bounce around a little bit here. Mix it up, as it were. Sierra says, I'll hear you, Gothi and Gothi East. How will each of you honor Roud the Strong on his Remembrance Day tomorrow? Thank you for reminding everybody of that. If anybody is unaware, tomorrow is Roud the Strong's Day of Remembrance. We referenced him.
Sierra that asked, not Sierra.
Oh, I read it wrong. My fault. I'm sorry, Sarah. I hope Sierra, wherever she is, will be honoring Roud the Strong. Trent, I think you wrote our article on Roud that we have on the website. Can you tell folks a little bit about him, about his situation, and then, anything special you will be doing in his honor tomorrow?
Yes. So Roud the Strong was a Norwegian. It says he was I think they say like sacrificial priest or something is how it was worded. He was a Gothi, essentially, at least a local practitioner who led ritual.
Gothi, I think.
Yeah, that might be it. Bloat priest, bloat Gothi, something. But so he was a Gothi. He was a warrior, and he was a seafarer in, I think it was the turn of the century, between the 10th and 11th century. So end of the 900s, start of the 1000s, 1000s, whatever you want to call it. And he, like many Asatru of the time, ran afoul of Olaf Tryggvason, who is a recurring villain in our Days of Remembrance stories from that time period. He found out that Roud was still Asatru and that his men were still Asatru. And so, he tried just speaking to Roud about it through emissaries, I assume, messengers and whatnot, saying, hey, you need to become Christian. If you do, I'll be your best friend. You'll be able to trade with Charlemagne or his empire and all that, make all these riches or whatever. And Roud the Strong did not do that, of course. He just kind of ignored him, I assume. And at some point, they ended up in a naval battle. And so Roud the Strong also had a reputation for being a wizard, is the word used, which is not something you see in a lot of Asatru stuff. But he was known as being a wizard because he was able to sail against the wind, which is a bit more common now. But at the time, in that part of Europe, it was pretty unheard of. And in this naval battle, he was able to take his extremely large ship and escape from Olaf Tryggvason and hide out for a bit. But eventually Olaf and his men found where he was hiding. They snuck in and captured him and his men. And Olaf gave him one last chance. He said, we will be best friends. We'll be, I'll give you all these fabulous cash and prizes if you just convert to worshiping this Jewish guy from 1,000 years ago. And Roud refused. He did not break his loyalty to the Aesir because he truly believed in them and he was truly loyal to them. And so, as I referenced earlier, Olaf had a snake chase down Roud's throat with a hot poker. And the snake, upon realizing it was inside of a guy, it chewed its way out through his side and killed Roud slowly and, gruesomely. And all of Roud's men either died a similar death or converted at the point of a sword. As far as what I will be doing to remember him tomorrow, I will tell my Christian coworkers about him because they like these stories and I get to kind of plant those seeds. I'll tell it better than I did just now, though. Promise. I will, we'll have a little dinner here tomorrow night. We'll kind of hail him, and been doing this thing where I sort of speak at my wife's belly, so my son will kind of hear my voice while he's in utero. Maybe I'll tell him the story. Sounds goofy. It's probably going to hurt my knees being that low for that long since I squatted like a dummy earlier, but, we'll make it happen. That's what I have planned so far. If I do something else cool, I will put it somewhere on MeWe so people can see it.
Fantastic. And I don't know if it was mentioned, but Roud is the Hof hero of Njordshof. He is celebrated and honored there. And we have a beautiful depiction of Roud that was put together by Witten Svan with the assistance of Trent's very own wife, Madison. Nick wants me to let it be known. If you want to keep track of your days and things in this 2025, we have one calendar left. There's one remaining calendar to be sold. Let's see who could be the first to get it. But we've got one left of our 2025 AFA calendars if anybody is interested. So from Witten Daniel Young. Hello and good evening. Hey, Daniel. I think it's awesome that we as a church are recognizing pioneers of Asatru, in particular, modern Asatru. How can we, as Gothar, quote unquote, regular members, so we as Gothar or quote unquote regular members seek to become like our exalted high law? Is there a particular quality of man or woman that they are both with? I don't understand the sentence, but yeah. Is there a particular quality, I guess, that helps one towards that ascension? How can we ascend like these heroes? Trent, what are your thoughts on
that? You can ascend like those heroes by kind of doing what we said earlier and all the baseline stuff, right? Wearing your hammer outside your shirt, being openly and proudly Asatru. And then on top of that, so you can't just do that. You can also have skin in the game. You can start by asking a Gothi or a local oath folk builder about apprentice folk building. You can volunteer to be a Hof steward by being the person that takes care of one of our Hofs. You can be one of the first people to move out to Sigerheim, join Nick out there, help out with that, and kind of do stuff that way. You can essentially, have skin in the game, put work in, leave your mark on Asatru and on the AFA. We have plenty of people in the AFA right now that, of course, they don't have a day of remembrance because they're on this side of the veil. But I have a whole running list in my head, and I'm sure it's similar to the Altera Gothi's list that he has probably, that once those people pass beyond the veil, they're going to have a day of remembrance on their birthday because of all they've done for modern Asatru and the AFA. So that's what you can do is you can get to work. And if you need, ideas on how to do that, you can shoot me or the Alshera Gothi or any of us an email.
Yeah, I mentioned before we live in a time of heroes, and I think that the particular status of being one of the higher of the AFA is it's a special level of ascension. I think there's probably a lot of different levels, but we live at a time and a place where individuals can have a much bigger impact on modern Asatru than folks, maybe a few hundred years from now when, thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of our folk have come home. The opportunity for one voice to be that significant is much more difficult. We live in a time where we still have some of the pioneers of modern Asatru that have given their whole life to fundamentally get this off the ground. There are opportunities around us. And when I look at the things okay, I'll say this, something of historical note. Originally, and I believe back in the mid 1980s during the Asatru Free Assembly days, the 9th of every month was assigned to someone as a day of remembrance for Asatru heroes. And that was a really early stage of the resurgence of modern Asatru, and it was really cool Viking stuff heavy. And that's not to be disparaging. There's plenty of cool Viking stuff. But the focus was really narrow, and there's some people on there that weren't really, there was, like Leif Erikson that wasn't Asatru, and there's some people on there that weren't known for their Asatru practice. But most were, and most were really, that was a very inspirational thing. And it was important to me when I became Alshera Gothi to expand that list to where we recognize our heroes and we remember them. That's such a fundamental aspect of our faith, for us to remember the heroes, to say their name, to speak toasts about them over Sumbul, to give them worship in the afterlife, and to help build their reputation on both sides of the veil. One of the biggest, going back, there's plenty of people in the world who were heroes and were Asatru. And I think that there's some ascension going with anyone who becomes a hero. But specifically the heroes that we're celebrating with Days of Remembrance, they're noted because of their loyalty to the Aesir. Everything we're talking about in this episode is what you do to get on that list, to make you being a champion of the gods a hallmark of your existence. And the other thing is living a life to where this defines who you are, to where you're known for your loyalty to the Aesir, and you throw yourself full force into maximizing the most you can do for the advancement of Asatru and for the exaltation of the Aesir in your life. And you do that through loyalty. You do it through all the positive expressions of it, but you also do it, by being willing to stand with them, even when there is consequence to yourself, even when it's not popular, even when it costs you friends or jobs or whatever else situation you may find yourself in. You putting the Aesir first in your life is what gets you to that level of ascension. And it's not that you magically transform yourself to where you ascend based on reshaping your spirit self. And I think a lot of people in more esoteric practices think that's the way to ascension. And perhaps that does help you ascend in a way. But the ascension that we're talking about here is the gods recognizing you and pulling you up and allowing you to become more than you are and pulling you up closer to them. And I think you earn that when you get their favor ultimately. And I think it's impious of me to have waited this long to mention this aspect of it. Fundamentally, I think what you do to earn ascension is that you earn the goodwill of the Aesir. It's a decision they make to pull you up or not, and they can make that on whatever criteria they choose. These are the things so far that have made the choices of who's been elevated self-evident to myself, and have put them on the Asatru folk assemblies calendar with their days of remembrance, though. What else we got? All right. So Rachel asks, question, how does the AFA view the priestly role of marriage counseling? Where do you draw wisdom to guide couples through difficulties? Trent, do you have anything that you'd like to say on that?
Yeah. We view the priestly role of marriage counseling similar to how the Catholic Church does, I think. And I know a lot of people are not fond of hearing that we do something or anything similar to how the Christians do it, but Catholicism is pretty darn pagan. So we take the good from it when we can, I guess. As far as, let me read the question again. Where do we draw wisdom to guide couples through difficulties? Frankly, through bad examples of a couple and through good examples of a couple. I was really fortunate to have joined the AFA when I was 18, and immediately, I'd been a legal adult from 3 or 4 months, and I go to an AFA event and I'm surrounded by all these great couples. I met Matt and Mandy there the first time. Steve and Sheila, Katie wasn't around yet. Never mind. But you get the picture. I had all these great couples around, and as as a single young adult guy, I got to see like, okay, this is what a normal, healthy relationship or marriage looks like, at least outside looking in. And I kind of I was there for the various AFA dramas over the last 10 years in the media and stuff, and never once did I see Githia McNallen betray Steve. Never did I see Mandy betray the Ulshera Gothi. I've never, you get the point. So I know what a good marriage looks like, and of course now I'm blessed enough to be in a good marriage myself, and I'll see bad marriages or relationships just out in my mundane life, right? And so marriage counseling, if it's pre-marriage counseling, I would ask various questions about how their faith or whatnot affects their relationship with each other, things like that. But yeah, to answer the question, essentially the wisdom I have for marriage counseling is all just gained through my own experience and seeing others in and outside of the AFA and how they interact with each other.
Trent, have you done any marriage counseling as a Gothi?
A little bit, not too much, but yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a couple of. All right, first, before I get on a roll, and so that I don't forget, Michael in Arizona donated $30 towards the Baldershoff steeple. Thank you very much for that. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be amazing. I know they got good plans for it, and we really appreciate your contribution. Hail Balder. With that said, our Gothar often get assigned. All right, so a few different things that I think are useful for folks to know about our priesthood and how some of the mechanics work. And I saw a little bit of the side chat on this earlier. Rachel, thank you for asking the question. This is a real question that puts meat on the bone, and I think it's a very important one in this day and age. So our Gothar certainly are spiritually connected to the ancient Gothar by unseen bonds that I don't think we fully can weigh or can measure. But in a modern sense, our Gothar trace our Gothic lineage back to the agreement made, the moment where the Allfather chose Steve McNallen to reforge Asatru. And all of our Gothar trace their ordination back to Steve in some. They were ordained by someone Steve ordained, or they were ordained by Steve himself, except for one of our Gothar who passed this last year, Gothi Thorgren Odin. He was actually ordained by, at the time, the Allsherry Gothi of the Asatru Felagith in Iceland, Jormundur Ingi Hansen. And that was because at that point in the AFA's history, the AFA wasn't currently ordaining Gothar. So just kind of a historical note on things. One of the things that comes with that, though, it comes with a spiritual authority from the Aesir and from the Allfather himself through that lineage. And in a very practical way, when it comes to counseling, it comes with the collected wisdom of all of those Gothar who have come before. So I saw over on the side, well, something to the effect of that our lore contains, all you need to do the counseling. Our Lord does a lot to help in a lot of different ways. And I think that was certainly one of the tools that greatly informed the first steps toward counseling when that's all we had. Whitten Erickson and I will do a show on this at a later date whenever I can get him arranged. But I want to do a show about how Asatru is a living faith as opposed to faiths that are locked in a time or a place and don't occur in a revelatory fashion in this day and age. We have learned a lot through our counseling of couples, of all of the situations you can probably imagine, and probably several that you can't. Certainly things that I didn't imagine until they blew my mind, because you never would have thought you would have heard this. So, and I tell new Gothar that all the time. You can prepare for every eventuality in every situation you think of. Life will always throw you some kind of a curveball in the counseling process. And I'm beating around the bush, but I'm trying to kind of paint a picture and talk about some bigger things. I will get to the actual marital counseling, but what I want to pregame it with is the tools that we use for it are the collected experience of our Gothar. And, I don't want to stop and do the math of how many years of counseling that is, but certainly in my time, and I was ordained in 2012, at midsummer 2012, I've done a lot of counseling. I think that it's something that our folk don't see enough, and I really want to talk about it to give our Gothar the credit that they've earned, because you see them when they come on this show and will talk about things, or when they do a ritual at a Hoff, or maybe they'll perform your wedding or your baby naming. What folks don't see is all of the blood, sweat, tears, heartbreak, and hours of dealing with people who are very badly damaged often, and who find themselves at some of the most tragic moments of their life needing support, needing people to lean on. And the wonderful men and women of our Gothar are, gladly, and I'm so proud, like they jump in, like it's not in a silly way, but when we get a call, so if we have an emergency thing, and sometimes what do I do? My wife just left me, or what do I do? My husband told me he wants a divorce. That's an emergency just as much as anything else. When we get word of that, and we pass that out to the Gothar as a whole, because you never know what time that comes in or who's doing what where. Our Gothar, eagerly try to actively throw themselves at, hey, I will do it. Hey, I'd be happy to help. Hey, if you think I'm the guy for it, I'm here. You let me know. I'm consistently impressed with how fast and eagerly they respond in a way that they want to help. But all things being equal, what the process looks like a little bit in a perfect situation, if both members of the couple are AFA members, what we like to do, and this is in the case of, look at the exact phrasing of the question because it makes a difference. So marriage counseling. So that could be anything. It could be divorce counseling stuff. It could be, if they're having a particular problem or a source of contention in the marriage. It could be sexual things. It could be any kind of violence, or it could be a lot of things. The best scenario is that we get a Gothi or a Githia to individually counsel each person separately, and then we work together to bring, I want to describe this. I never thought of how to really present this in a way that everybody's going to understand. So to where each of the two individuals would get their own Gothi to talk to tell their side of the story, and to get individual advice advocating for their best interest and for them to come out as whole and as healthy in the process as they can. And doing that with each party, and then coming together and trying to find ways to repair that family if that's possible. Now, not knowing what's going on or where people are at, that's not always the outcome. And whatever counseling we're doing, we can't force people to do things they don't want to do. But if we're involved in both sides and somebody is advocating for each person and they don't feel like they're being ganged up on, or like everybody's on her side or everybody's on his side or whatever, we can work together as a united priesthood. Not everybody involved, certainly, but the two folks that are doing the counseling of the members of the couple, and work towards that family ending up as healthy and as whole as they can be on whatever the other side of this process looks like. There's some things that are deal breakers and some people that no longer are going to be in that relationship, and we can't force them, but we can very much work with them on how that separation looks, on the best way to handle that that's going to be the least traumatic for everyone involved, for the family, for the children if there are children involved, and what that looks like. But more hopefully, we can work on them communicating with one another, and we can work through getting that process resolved in a way that heals their family. And that's always the goal. That's always what we want. I mean, barring situations of horrendous abuse or particularly heinous things, we want to heal the family, and we want to keep families together, and we want to keep, children in whole and not broken homes, as long as that's a safe option that's possible. But working towards having realism when we go into it, and working towards a realistic outcome that makes that family as healthy optimally as we can get them, is a big part of it. One of the things, it gets like, what are the best teachings? Or so a next question from Rachel is, and what are the best teachings to use for mediation between members of the community? I think it's a similar thing, if not marriage counseling. If there's two parties involved and they are both members of the Asatru Folk Assembly, then we do a similar approach. We would want to go through to talk to each of those people and see where they're at. And this one, looking in terms of mediation, I think is going to make the next thing I was going to say more tangible, there's two things that have served me outside of trusting in trusting in the ICER and them blessing me with, hopefully some momentum going in and some wisdom to deal with things. The things on my own that I think have been most beneficial counseling wise, either marital counseling, individual counseling, or in a case of mediation, each of the Gothar involved, first, you let the person express out loud what their problem is. Like, what are you upset about? Tell me what's wrong. And a lot of the things I say on this program are very, very simple. And I think that the fundamentals are what's really important. And you start from the simple and you go out. Some things are common sense, but unfortunately, we don't always think of them up front. The act of saying something out loud, first, it gets it off your chest and it takes away the burden of it going unsaid and what happens if I don't say it. Swan and I have talked about that too, to where the root of magic is speech. That's the first thing that takes something from an internal thought and projects it into the world. That's the expression of putting your will out into the world. And there's a hesitancy and a fear of that because that invokes judgment. It invokes consequence. If you just keep it to yourself, then it's nothing. Once you say it out loud, then it's real. So getting someone to get it off their chest, to vocalize what makes them upset, what they're angry about, what they're hurt by, what is the problem, takes a certain amount of pressure off first. Secondly, you hear the words that you're saying, and often you realize how that sounds when you say it out loud. Oftentimes, what we've worked up in our head to be a very, very big deal, when you say it out loud, it seems really petty. And that's not because whoever said it is, a small-minded person. We all have a tendency, when it roots around in our head, it builds a momentum and we build things up to be bigger deals than they are. We all do it, myself included. Every one of us does that. Some to a greater degree than others, certainly. But saying it out loud, you hear how it sounds. That in and of itself is therapeutic, and you can adjust according to it. But you also see the reaction to the person you say it to, and that helps. We would never want people to feel foolish or to make people feel embarrassed. But you do want to, you see what you're saying and what that looks like in the light of day. And that was the first part. The second part, which is very similar, is asking what victory looks like. And I'm sure different Gothar put it a different way. And I don't mean this to, I don't know. It is what it is. You want to know what each side wants, and then you work back from there. And if you have to be silly to get there, it is never meant in a silly way. It's meant you pick the extremes and then you work back from it. Hey, could you be friends? Could you ever make up with so-and-so and you guys be friends again? Well, never. Okay, well, what if they gave you $1 million? Could you for $1 million? Well, yeah, of course I could for $1 million. All right, well, they don't have $1 million. They're not going to do that. What about $100,000? All right, 100,000 I can do. Cool. Well, they're not going to do that either. That's asking a lot. But what if they said they're sorry and they bought you a Whopper? Double Whopper, and we'll call it good. It sounds dumb, and maybe that was a dumb example for me to use, but sometimes I've had it that way, to where it becomes that lighthearted of a conversation, because when they said something out loud, they realized what they were angry about wasn't that big. But you ask, like, hey, what does it look like? Okay, you're telling me that if they gave you something, it would make it worthwhile. I don't think that's just materialism. We as a folk, when our concept of doing wrong to someone is you're taking something from them. And the first step is to fill the hole of what you took. Things have a value, and you can express it with money or with whoppers or with sincere, acts of somebody helping you out with something, or if what they've taken from you is reputation, maybe in the same place that they said something that offended you, you have them issue a retraction and apologize in that same audience. Trying to figure out what they feel is broken is how you go about figuring out what can be done to heal that's broken. A lot of time, just going through those steps of conversation get both parties to a place where they want to come together and fix things. When we do a mediation and both parties are involved, to where we're not just talking to them separately, when we come together, one of the really important factors that I don't think should ever be omitted is asking the gods to be witness and to help in that process, to invoke, depending if there's a personal god or goddess that's relevant in the situation or particularly special to the people involved. In general, I think Forseti is a very good one to ask to help come to a resolution, but to put it in a divine context, to have the mediation does a lot to affect the souls of the people who are doing the mediating, to affect or who are doing the two parties, as it were, and it sets a certain tone of taking it seriously and that the gods are watching, and that tends to help people view things in the best. I think that it helps them be aware that they need to be on their best behavior before the gods, and they need to treat each other the best they can. Another thing when it comes to mediation, and I hope this isn't meandering, I'm just trying to put on all the different things that have worked well for me in both marital counseling and mediations, is reminding ourselves and reminding each other, and specifically reminding the people that you're engaged in the mediation with. Part of loyalty and part of frith is extending a maximal courtesy to one another, to assume everybody is acting out of noble intentions and coming from a good place. When in doubt, you assume everything is good intention, especially when we're doing things at distance. If we're doing texting or, posts on Facebook or whatever people are doing, whatever digital medium, it's very easy to misinterpret tone and assume everybody has the worst possible tone if you don't like them or if you guys are going through an issue. To actively make yourself to put the effort into, no, I'm going to assume they meant that in the nicest possible way until I know different. If you can get both parties to extend that courtesy to one another, that goes a long way, especially in the early stages of a mediation. You ask what are some teachings or some good sources of information or whatnot. I think before one of our Gothar goes into any of those situations, if they have the time to stop and to make an offering and to spend a little bit of time in prayer, asking our gods to help you, especially if you are engaged in the work of the priesthood, is an appropriate and I would say a necessary thing to do, and that helps a lot. So I think that's important. And I hope that got to the question. If it didn't, or if there's other pieces of it that you'd like more on, please ask, and I'd be happy to answer. Trent, what are your thoughts on this? Is citizenship or social contract considered an oath in the AFA? Just curious. What are your thoughts?
Citizenship, I would say it can be one of two things. One of those is social contract. I don't know if you become a citizen, like a legal immigrant of another place, if they make you swear an oath of citizenship. If they do, I would say, yeah, that's an oath. So the AFA considers it an oath. As far as social contract, I always think of social contract theory. You know, the idea that as citizens, we follow the laws of a given society, and in return, that society does good things with our taxes. I mean, that's implicit, though, rather than explicit. It's not stated. You know, I didn't have to put my hand on a Bible or whatever at birth and agree to, you know, pay taxes and follow the laws. So I would say no, social contracts are that is not an oath in and of itself. I suppose you could, when taking a real oath, you know, you could promise to follow social norms, but no, I wouldn't say that's an oath.
Um, that's an interesting question, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I think I think something to consider on oaths, and I'm not advocating for dishonesty or taking false oaths, but oaths you are forcibly made to take are different than oaths that you sign up and volunteer to take and that you actively pursue taking. Um, Again, nothing is completely black and white. There's variance of things and there's a hierarchy of things, and sometimes things come in conflict with one another. Um, but yes, to a degree, in all things being equal, if you're taking an oath of citizenship, then yes, as long as the nation that you are taking that oath to upholds what they're sworn to in that thing, because that's the other thing people need to understand about oaths. And nobody listening to this use this as an excuse to be dishonest. Don't do that to me and my words. But oaths are not one-sided. Don't feel victimized by an oath you took. If you swore to do X, if the other party does Y and they don't do Y, that's not you breaking the oath. The oaths become invalid. Oaths are multiple sided typically. Sometimes they're not. And that depends on what you do when you step into a voluntary oath. But there are implied things that make oaths valid, and that requires both people to be acting in good faith. But yes, as long as those things hold true in a very broad sense, I think citizenship. You see, it's different when you're born a citizen to something. It's a little bit different. If you have to take an oath of citizenship because you, as an adult person, become a citizen of a different country, I think that probably looks different in various places that you go. I do believe there is a naturalization oath that people take for American citizenship if they're not born citizens. Um, so yeah, that is a form of an oath, absolutely. Social contract is a lot more broad. It is an agreement between, but it's I say that it's theoretical. When people talk about it, like when you get born, you don't sign a social contract. That's not a thing. The government never signed, the people in office never signed that. You never signed that. You were born into something, and we have social understandings. I don't think it is wrong to look at it in a broad sense, like you would another good faith agreement you are in with someone or somebody. Um, but that social contract, I wouldn't limit that to, like Immanuel Kant's understanding of it, or what John Stuart Mill, I think, had an understanding of it as well. Different places at different times, that social contract looks real different. And I think you do a disservice to judge it on some Enlightenment era philosophers' terms as opposed to the real situation you find yourself in and the particulars of the society that you live in. But I think, yes, that's a little bit broader than a really specific person to person oath. But it is an agreement that I think you owe a certain amount of honor to. If your society gives you the things they say they're going to do right by you, then your participation, in it, in what's expected of you, is an important thing to be considered. I think the details matter, and that's just too broad to really flesh out with an exactitude. And yes, Sierra, the Pledge of Allegiance is exactly that. It is intended as a post-Civil War oath to bind Americans to not break off into small pieces. But again, it's funny because it's conflicting with the wording of the Constitution and the Constitutional Convention on things. And again, the details matter. But yes, that is the idea, is to get people to publicly swear their allegiance and their agreement to abide by a certain terms with the United States. And that's what the purpose of that is. What else we got? Trent, what's the Croatian War Master asks, what is the meaning of the sun cross Gothi East is wearing?
So the backstory behind it, which may help to explain it, is this belonged to boat builder Mike Malilo, and he put it up for auction at Baldershoff Frey Faxi last year, and I won it. A lot of universalist lefty, pagans would say that the solar cross, especially this style of it, represents the 4 seasons and cycles, and they're partially correct. Our ancestors actually only followed 2 seasons, so that part is incorrect. But the idea of the cycle, the natural cycles, natural law, moving sunwise in a circle, being unbroken, right action, that's what it represents to me, is natural law and cosmic order working in tandem, being unbroken, and right action always moving forward.
Trent, do you have any New Year's resolutions / oaths?
This is a really boring answer, but no, I don't.
That's on. Truth is another one of our noble virtues, so I appreciate that. I do. This year, so a very long time AFA couple, and some good friends of Mandy and myself who've been really, really great to us. They have a 12th night celebration that they do every year. And for whatever reason, this is the first year we've been able to make it out to it. It's 45 minutes away or something. But it was a really nice evening, and they forget where they said they found this thing, but they've got a really big representation of, I think they may have welded the internal spokes, but it's the same sun wheel that Trent's wearing. And they've got, I'd say it's 6 foot diameter or so, a really big representation of that they, wrap in straw, I think, and light. And part of the ritual was putting things on there that we wanted to leave behind or to, move past in the coming year. And it was a really beautiful ceremony, and I was honored to be a part of it. And what I put on there, I don't think this is like blowing out the candles. I don't think I lose the game if I tell you what I wish for or whatever. So I'm trying to think of a way to make the most sense to people. I get So this is y'all's fault for listening to this program and participating in it. One of the listening taxes is that sometimes I go off on strange rabbit trails. Sometimes they're useful and entertaining. Other times, maybe not so much. We'll have to see. One of the things that occurred to me earlier this year, I don't know how many of you get, I assume that a lot of our audience is familiar with the rune Kinas. And a lot of, I was trying to really do a deep dive in the runes this year. And I was, I understand that there's a modern tradition of looking at it as if it is a torch. I don't find a lot of evidence of that. I don't find a lot of historicity of that until we get into the Anglo-Saxon period. I don't find that in deep rune lore of that being the case. But what I do find is it being a burning ulcer or a burning wound, like a burning internal ulcer. And that always just sounded kind of gross and odd and never connected with me for a long time. But I really thought about it a lot. And, I feel it was revealed to me this year in a way that is one of the ways that the ICR communicate with me. And I think that different people experience divinity in a lot of different ways. But one of the ways that I do is I get these just burning internal, literally fire in the belly, burning motivation that I have to accomplish things, or these things need to be done, or AFA needs to reach certain goals or do certain things. And if I don't express those, or if I don't handle those in a productive way to where they progress and they move forward and there's something that happens, I burn myself up inside with this, with this Odinic fury that this thing needs to get done. I don't blame that on the Allfather. I blame that on me. But I think that's one of the ways that the ICR speak to me. And I treasure that in a way, if that fire can lead to productive things happening. What it has a tendency to do is I notice all of the things that I want to see fixed, or things that I want to make different, or want to see improved, or want to see made better. And if I can't immediately, because I don't have the skill set, or I don't have the right manpower in place, or it's just not the right time, or there's not the right resources at the time, or whatever to do it, I'll get grumpy about the thing that we don't have or we're not doing, instead of appreciating all of the good things that we do have that we are doing, because I'm always trying to move to that next step. And again, I think in the handled correctly, I think that's a really good thing. But it also has a tendency for me to get real grumpy about stuff if I'm not making the progress I want with the AFA in certain areas. So I have decided to try to not do that this year, and take the time to focus more heavily on the things that we do have that are doing well, other than all of the ambitions that I have for us that I haven't been able to make happen for us yet. So that's kind of my personal thing I resolved to do this year. Oh, I love you too, sweetheart. Okay, I will. All right. Yeah, that's what I got as far as resolutions. I don't think it's something too fancy, but that's the thing I've got. All right, it's a big question. Do you believe fate was determined from the start? What happens is what has always been meant to happen. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think I remember hearing that's what Vikings believed in. Trent, what are your thoughts?
Short answer, yes. It's more complicated than just that, but yes. It's said that the Norns weave our fate. They are currently weaving our fate, right? There's Ord, Verdandi, and Skuld. that which has been, I think it is that which is, and that which should be, not what will be, but what should be. And that kind of lends itself to sounding like fate isn't inexorable, but so if we look at it on a cosmic scale, the Aesir know that Ragnarok is coming, and they know that Gimli will rise out of the water and things will start over. So my short answer is yes, but that shouldn't be used as an excuse to ever not do something or not take some opportunity.
So I think that Trent and I come to the same place, but from a different way. So I'm gonna say no, but with the same kind of asterisks. No, I don't think the Vikings believe that. I think that's a common misunderstanding that people like to say to make them strange or exotic, or to put a layer of, I don't know, noble savage on them. The if that okay, there are greater cosmic cycles that are put in motion that happen, and that certainly interplays with fate, that interplays with Earth as a thing. Like winter, and then there's spring, and then there's summer, and then there's fall, and there's winter. That's going to keep happening. We don't look at that like fate or destiny. We look at that like that's just the natural process of things. Those kind of things are fate, and they happen. Cycles happen, but they can have greater or lesser intensity. There's a lot of variant there. So there's currents within Earth that lead things with directionality. But there is a tremendous value and ground to be gained when people fight against that, when it is headed in a bad direction. People have referred to that in a way as man against time. I think that there is stuff to where there is a flow of things, and you want to redirect that flow. And that's part of the ability to. So a theme in our lore, and much Western lore, is this idea of being able to see your fate, or know the future, or have those kind of what's the word I'm looking for? All right, the better word will come to me, but when you do rune readings, when you read entrails, when you read, the movement of sacred flocks of birds, or of, herds of horses, on how to interpret signs that show you glimpses into Earth, into the future, into the well of fate, and show you into the future. And the idea is, if you know that beforehand, you can act differently than you normally would. Otherwise, there's no point to it. The very fact that that's a thing goes against the concept that everything is predetermined to happen a certain way, because if it is, there's no point in you trying to figure that out. What you want to figure out is where things are headed, so that you can lean into that to enhance that, or so you can lean hard against it and try to shift it. Often the currents within Earth are such that you can't completely divert the river in a different way, but you can absolutely affect it. And If not, there's no free will. And if there's no free will, you can't have heroism. Nothing's heroic. You're just acting as you normally would have because it's all predetermined for you. That's not the way of the hero, and it's not the way of our ancestors. And we see that in the very fact that Skuld is named Skuld and not, I think Vilja is want, but will happen, must happen. It's what should happen, or what's you are aimed towards happening. And we all see that in small ways in life. People that are destined for greatness but don't achieve it. If fate is fixed, you can't be destined for something and not achieve it in that paradigm. For you not to achieve your destiny, there has to be flexibility there, or else that makes zero sense. You see people that are projected towards a certain outcome and they completely screw it up because they don't want to try, because they're lazy, because they're afraid, and they run from their fate. You see that time and again. So I don't believe it is fixed. I do believe that there's a complex tapestry of things that create currents in your own life, and big currents, big social currents, big galactic currents that head things in a particular direction. But you can stand against those currents if that direction is less, or is bad, or is contrary to the will of the Aesir, or to your will, and try to bend that to something better. And I think that is the great struggle of us as individuals and as people, is to battle against what would, negative currents in earth, to try to correct that, to try to balance our Hemenia and get something better. If you start out, because that's kind of the nature of heroism, if you start out in a completely favorable situation with a favorable fate, with favorable Hemenia, with a favorable current in earth, and you just ride that, that's great, and it's great for you. But the hero, the true accomplishment, is if you start out at a disadvantage and you still are able to overcome. If you start with the odds against you and you succeed over overwhelming odds, we have always recognized inherently that is something much more special and much more amazing, because it's rare and because it's hard to do. If fate was fixed, I don't think that's a real conversation that we would have. And fundamentally, I think we all know that on the micro scale, when people talk about fate, anybody who seriously talks about everything being predetermined, those people almost invariably are talking about grand things, like the time of their death. So is how much creamer they're putting in their coffee tomorrow predetermined? Well, when you get like that, more people are like, oh, well, no, well, and they don't, it's kind of one or the other. Either things are completely fixed or they're not. And if they're not, it means things are, to one degree or another, alterable due to the course of your will. And that's one of the great struggles of our folk and of our gods, is seeing a predestined outcome that things are headed towards and trying to stave that off or alter it in some way. And we see that theme in our lore, both in a grander mythological sense and in the sagas and in folk tales and all throughout. So I say no, but I do say there are big cosmic currents at play that are seemingly unalterable, if that helps. That's always a murky topic when we talk about, because very few things in Asatru are 100% clean, all of this and none of that. There's a complex interplay of things. And it's one of the things that is challenging about our faith, but it's also one of the things that is special about our faith. Truth is one of our core values. Truth is not always easy, but it is always true. It's easier if we just, me and Trent just picked some hocus pocus and told you that's what it was. But we wouldn't do that. Our Troth through the ICR doesn't allow us just to make stuff up. So we have to deal with the complexities of a complex universe. And that's one of the special things about Asatru, I think. All right, got a number of questions rolled in the past few minutes here. This time it really is Sierra. What of the 12 or the 10 noble virtues do you personally find hardest to adhere to, for lack of a better word, and why? Trent, go.
Maybe industriousness, in so far that I may have a goal or a thing at my day job or an AFA thing I want to accomplish, and it takes longer than it should or than I'd like for it to, either due to my own failings or someone else's. Yeah, that's probably the closest one I have. The others are less tangible things, I think, and they're kind of easier to just sort of live, whereas industriousness has that tangible aspect to it, I suppose. That's a really tough question, but it's a good question.
See, I'm overthinking the follow-up, and I'll go ahead and throw you the follow-up now. What do you think which one is the easiest and why for you?
Fidelity or loyalty. If it, as far as like marriage, I just have to not be a dick to my wife, I mean, as far as following oaths, I enjoy my job as a Gothi, and so I get to do fun stuff, and that's me keeping an oath I made. That one's the easiest for me.
So, and again, these are the kind of things I overthink a lot. What I think is really hard is self-reliance. I find very often, and when I say very often, I think it's because it stands out to me and it like bothers me a lot. It really bothers me when I run into a bunch of stuff that I need to do, want to do, must do, but I can't do by myself and I have to rely on other people. I don't like that. And especially when dealing with the AFA and some bigger systems. And poor Nick is a victim of this all the time. There's tons of stuff that has to happen that I can't do, and I have to ask Nick to do for me because I don't see the matrix and like speak computer like he does on some of the systems that we have. It's just not something in my wheelhouse. So knowing that something needs to be accomplished and sitting around stewing about it because I can't get it done or I don't have that skill set, that's something that I struggle with a lot. I don't know if that's like lacking in the virtue of self-reliance. I try to learn the things, but the concept of self-reliance, being able to fully embody that's hard for me to do. And I try to work towards it, but that's hard. What's easy? Easy's funny as a thing because I don't know that these things are easy, but they're simple and I'm accustomed to them. It's like, I think I was going to say truth, loyalty, or truth, fidelity, or hospitality. They're not easy, but they're self-evident. I know what they are. And I've worked really hard to build my life in such a way to where there's not the conflicts that other people might experience with those, or that I would have if I would have lived a different life. And I don't mean like by being a dirtbag. I just mean like I've made the AFA the entirety of my life to where this is what I'm doing all of the time. All of my friends, I didn't cut off a bunch of friends to be part of the AFA, but the way my life has developed, my friendships are within the AFA. My family is built within and around the AFA. Things are in harmony, so there's not the push to be less than honest with other people that may not get it or whatever. That's not there because of how I've structured my life. Loyalty, all of my loyalties stack on each other and work together and harmonize. So I think I get the best end of that bargain. And in hospitality, I just really like that's my thing. Like that's the first way I started experiencing Asatru, was welcoming people into my home and having people over and sharing a meal. And so that's never been a difficulty or a hardship for me. That's always been a joy and something that, strengthens me and brings up my mood and helps. And I really love. So hospitality, I'll say, is the easiest for me. Okay, also from Sierra. Trent, how do you work to practically apply these virtues daily? Do you try to hit all 10 every day, or do you just lead a life that hits all of these regularly?
Yeah, I try to just lead my life in a way where I don't violate any of them, I suppose. Something I do every single morning and every night before bed. I have my ordination certificate above my altar, and it sits this way on my side of the bed. And I kind of wake up for a second and then regret being awake because it's early and I have to get up for work. And then I kind of read my ordination certificate, and it's got the Alshera, Gothi, and Steve's faces on it. It's kind of funny. Then I say it out loud, but I sort of like focus on, that Gothic lineage that the Alshera Gothi mentioned. Like, I'm a part of that. I'm carrying that with me everywhere I go. I wear this. It symbolizes that. And it sounds stupid saying it out loud, but I just sort of remind myself I need to be worthy of that today. And then when I go to bed at night, I kind of glance at it again and I go, was I worthy of that today? I'd like to think the answer is usually yes. I usually tell myself yes. But there's probably days I could have done it better. I just try and lead my life in a way where those are followed, or just rather not explicitly violated.
There was a time when I first started that I think that I did kind of try to think about them individually daily. I don't now, not because it's any less important, but because I think I've got a lens to where I frequently find myself something's really important to me, and long-term listeners of the program may realize this. I try to go back to fundamentals and boil things down to like the simplest thing and then work back out from them a lot. That's how I approach a lot of the things that we do. Getting back to the fundamentals of our core virtues is something that I think about a lot to kind of frame my thoughts and approach situations. So I think that that's something I do as they come up. I think I've internalized thinking about them in those terms to where I try to make sure that when applicable situations come up in my life, those are leading my decision making, or heavily influencing my decision making on stuff. So I think that's how I'd answer that. Finn Wraith asks, do you believe in prophecies that people make that then come true in some way are real, or just a coincidence? Trent?
I'm not going to dismiss the possibility that the Aesir speak to people in a way where maybe they would know of some big thing coming and they would be correct about it. But generally speaking, no, I don't really believe in that stuff. And I think if it's, because I mean, there's like, you'll see these stories about like, oh, this old lady in West Virginia with one eye has predicted all of the last U.S. presidents. Well, I mean, so have I, other than the 2020 election. You know what I mean? So no, I don't.
There's an asterisk by that one. So, yes, I'm a counter signal, Trent, but again, not really. It's just a matter of degrees. Yes, to your question. Yes, I think some of them are absolutely real. Yes, I think lots of them are just made up nonsense that happen to coincidentally work out. Or what my other favorite one is the quatrains. If you make up something that's so completely ridiculously vague, you can apply it to any situation, then you always win. Like, you're always right. Then there will be snows from the north, something warm from the south. A wind will come from the east, and then a great man will rise. And you can use that for literally anything ever, always. No, there's a lot of charlatans, and there's a lot of people that may even be well-intentioned that are lunatics or are just wrong. But to follow up on the earlier fate question, yes, there is a tapestry of earth right now that one with enough second sight, enough wisdom, enough magical gravitas could perceive into the future these things and see the battle plan of the next however long. But I also stand by what I said earlier. That's subject to change because we're reshaping that every layer that we lay into the well of earth. All of our actions, all of our deeds, we're weaving that tapestry as we speak. But if everything stopped at this point and carried on exactly like the momentum was carrying it, there is a destination. That destination always changes. But when you're talking about the current that everyone is headed towards, when I think that the meme the kids use these days is NPC, but there's a whole lot of people in this world that don't live introspective lives, that don't try to challenge the boundaries of their existence. They don't try to ascend and be more than they are. The concept of being a hero is laughable or something we, choose to use to deify disabled children instead of people who've acted with extreme virtue. There are so many of them and so much weight behind the momentum of things. I think that there are that is accessible to people to be able to prophesy. Or when I say prophesy, I think that involves rune readings or interpretations of signs or visions or dreams or other things. All of that goes into man, why can't I find that word? It's bothering me. It's tip of my tongue. I'm no better than this. But anyways, yes, I think that's absolutely a thing because you can see those broad enough currents. You can see into that tapestry. I've mentioned before on this show, one of the key fundamentals of the idea of magic is being able to recognize the threads in that tapestry and being able to move with it or see that coming and act in accordance. Divination. That's the word that would not come to me. I found it, divination. Yeah, I think divination is absolutely a possible thing, but I think 99 times out of 100, it's either a liar or a lunatic. But that one time just needs to happen once for it to be a thing, and I think it's happened well more than once in our history. Has the Hoff hero of Phrasehoff been decided? No. So I say yes, that is the answer is no. That's something that once we get that, we'll decide on that. I want to talk with the leadership in that area at the time with the Gothar there and determine who fits best in that spot. As far I don't know internally, and Witten and Githya Erickson, they will have a big say in that. I don't know if they have any internal discussions about kind of who they'd like or what they were thinking. So I'm not sure if there's a current front runner, but that has not been decided yet. And last question of the night. Are there things from your earlier days in Asatru that you now regret? And are there things you would do differently than you did when you were younger if you could do it again? I'm going to go quick, give my daughter a hug. I'll be right back. Trent, go ahead and tackle this question.
All right. I get to find a way to fill space until he gets back. Yeah, of course. Like I said, I joined the AFA when I was 18, and my first national event was right before I headed out to boot camp and infantry school at Fort Benning, and I got back from that, and I was acting like a kid fresh out of boot camp would act. I was very into the whole Viking mindset, the whole warrior mindset thing. One moment in particular, I guess, that I really regret, if I had to pick one, was High Sumble at Ostara in 2017. I was having such a great time, and for whatever reason, I felt possessed to, in the third round, say over the horn, I effing love the AFA. And a lot of the people at the time were like, woohoo, cool. Nowadays, though, I would never speak like that over the horn or in front of most people, even. So yeah, that's something I regret. I think about that often and cringe at myself. I wish I could go back in time and slap 20-year-old Trent in the back of the head for that one. Other things I would change. Yeah, my language about what I call Asatru. Like I said, I used to call myself Norse pagan or just pagan or heathen in general. I would change it to Asatru so that I wasn't defining my faith on someone else's terms. Other stuff. I would kind of try to approach everything with a bit more piety and a bit more seriousness. Not that I didn't take it serious per se, obviously I'm here, so I do take it serious and all, but I would have just tried to be more reverent anytime I was at an AFA event.
So you're complaining you had to fill space. I gave you one of the meatier questions we had tonight. All right. Yes. And I'm try to give you what comes to me again. This is the kind of thing these are the kind of things that keep people up at night. Yeah, I mean, I think that something is very wrong with somebody who would find themselves at my age and wouldn't see things that they did when they were younger and wish they would have done them different. I think there's a million answers to that question. Trying to think of ones that stand out, and specifically ones about Asatru that stand out. We all go through, seemingly we all go through, a lot of us certainly do, I did, go through phase when you're in your late teens and your early 20s where you know everything and you know the right way to do everything and everybody should do things the way that 20 years of your wisdom tell you that things should happen. And there's a cockiness and a lack of understanding for elders and for why things are done the way they are that I think displays itself with an arrogance when we're young all too often. I think I had that a lot in my personal life as a kid. Like I was a brat. I was an only child, and I was, I should have got a lot of whoopings that I did not get that would have served me well. As a young man getting involved in Asatru, I had, again, I was like that to a degree. In general, I wasn't disrespectful, but the first time that I interacted with Sheila McNallen was getting in a stupid internet argument with her about some nonsense. And she's Sheila McNallen, and I was literally nobody, and that's absurd, and I feel bad about that to this day. It was involving Charles Lindbergh somehow, but I don't remember the particulars of what I was spurging out about or whatever. There's a number of times, and there still is, to where I get bent out of shape or would get bent out of shape by different people not knowing things that were maybe going on in their own life, and I was judging them harshly, not having all the information and all the facts of things they were going through that kind of led to whatever they were doing that got me grumpy. And been people like that I haven't extended the kindness to that I wish that I would have. And that's definitely a thing. I know a lot of this about Asatru, so I'll try to, there's infinite things that I could do on this. And I think some of that introspection is really important. I hope we all do it to a degree, but don't get locked in it either. It's a truism when it's kind of a cop-out when you ask those questions and somebody's like, no, I don't regret anything because everything I did led me to where I am and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. That's true. Like, I believe that is true. But I also don't think it's an honest reflection. I'm glad of where I've ended up. I think a lot of that has been through effort and hard work and me doing the right things at the right times or whatever. But I know that a tremendous amount of that's been the benevolence of other really amazing people that I've gotten to know and build relationships with, and a massive amount of that is the goodwill and the blessings of our ICR. Asatru wise, I think, we all go through that. We know exactly how it should be, and it should be my way or the highway on whatever, whether we have any wisdom on or not. I think I went through that at the beginning. It didn't cause me to break loose, but it caused me to probably be more obnoxious than I should have been. I think it took me too long to understand. Like, a lot of people to this day get involved in this, and I think it was a little bit easier to do in my day because there was more competition for it. But thinking that there's this equality of things and like, why can't we all just get along? Man, at the time I thought it'd be so great. How come the AFA and the Odinic Rite and the Asatru Alliance and, if whatever good element of the Troth, and there was some at that time in history, how come we all just don't get together and, we could all work together all the time? And I think that's even people who think that now and think that about greater white positive groups and things and causes. I think all too often we think everybody's on the same team and working together. And I think that's motivated out of really beautiful sentiments. But it's not true, and it's not the way the world works. When we see good things happen, it's because people come together under one tent, under one, not being pulled in 1,000 different directions, but under one clear path of direction and leadership and focus. You do that by those groups of people combining if they really are on the same page, and not by everybody, being the king of their own backyard kingdom. And I think that was a phase that I went through early on that I got, disabused of pretty quick. Asatru wise, I don't know. I was really fortunate. I got connected with really good people. I found the right people at the right times in my life. Any of the big betrayals or people that have really let me down in Asatru weren't at the beginning. I can't look back to like my younger days when that was happening. I think that's, been in the last decade or so, most of that. Yeah, I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm very happy with the experience I've had, and I've had amazing people to guide me and help me and teach me as I came up. And I'm very fortunate for that. And I think that's what I got for this evening. Trent, is there anything you wanted to leave people with this evening?
Yes. Let's see. Nick says to plug the Njord's Hoff Fund. You want to find out who the Hoff Hero Frey's Hoff is, pay off Njord's Hoff, and we'll get to find out. Yes, pay off my Hoff for me. But the other thing I wanted to plug is Charming the Plow at Njord's Hoff. Of course, it's going to be a great event. The McNallans will be there. All the Flavels will be there. I'll be there. All of our Gothar of that district. Some Arkansas people are coming out. Sierra Chapman will be there. Plenty of people, newer members or newer leadership you may not have met at a national event before will be there. And then also Ostara at Thorishoff, which Ostara is my favorite event and has been since I've joined the AFA. It's the first two bloats I ever got to be a part of, and that showed me that the ICR were real, were done by the first and then the second and current Alshera Gothar. And so that event means a lot to me, and Thorishoff was my first Hoff, so it's also super special to me. And it's a great time, and it is March 21st through the 23rd. It's the same dates, different months, easy to remember. Get your tickets to both of those, and I hope to see you at both of those. And that's all I got.
All right, guys, thank you so much. As always, y'all been wonderful. It's great to get to spend an evening with you. Remember, loyalty isn't just something you talk about or something that applies to a shield wall or fighting dragons or whatever in your head. Loyalty is a daily effort to live up to your commitments and to live up to your relationships and the bonds that you have with our gods and our folk and those you care about. It can be a matter of life or death. More often than not, it's a matter of just standing up, having a little bit of backbone, and speaking proudly about things that you believe in. But be loyal. Define yourself by your loyalty. Look forward to talking to you next week, where Witten Swan and I will go over the Solar Leod, I think, the Songs of the Sun. That's an interesting one, and one that a lot of people, I don't think, do a lot in or aren't familiar with. So that'll be interesting. And till then, hail the ICR, hail the folk, hail the AFA. And remember, victory never sleeps.